Welcome to Innovations and Breakthroughs with your host, Rich Goldstein, talking about the evolutionary, the revolutionary, the inspiration and the perspiration, and those aha moments that change everything. And now, here's your host, Rich Goldstein.
Rich Goldstein here, host of the Innovations and Breakthroughs podcast, where I feature top leaders and the path they took to create change. Past guests include Joe Polish, Roland Frazier, and Mitch Russo. This episode is brought to you by my company, Goldstein Patent Law, where we help you to protect your ideas and products. We've advised and obtained patents for thousands of companies over the past 28 years. So if you're a company that has software, a product, or a design you want protected, go to goldsteinpatentlaw.com, where there are amazing free resources for learning about the patent process. You could email my team at welcome@goldsteinpc.com to explore if it's a match to work together. You could also check out the book I wrote for the American Bar Association that explains in plain English how patents work. It's called the ABA Consumer Guide to Obtaining a Patent. I have with me here today James Whittaker. James is a 3-time best-selling author and the host of the Win the Day podcast. He's been profiled in Success Magazine, Money Magazine, and Entrepreneur, and featured on 600-plus radio, podcast, and television shows, including The Today Show, The Gabby Reese Show, and Entrepreneurs on Fire. It's my pleasure to welcome here today James Whittaker. Welcome, James.
Hey, Rich. Always great to see you, my friend. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. My pleasure. And looking at entrepreneurship, how did you get started with your entrepreneur journey?
So it was something that I had never realized was actually possible for me growing up in Australia with the career that I was on. I sort of fell into this career in financial services, which was pretty successful by the end of it. I was managing an advisor team of more than 30 financial advisors with about $2 billion under management. But I just had this sense that there was something more for me. So I left Brisbane, Australia, where I grew up for the first 28 years of my life. And I moved over to Boston to study an MBA that was 9 months in Boston, 3 months in Shanghai, in China. So very different to Brisbane, Australia, where I grew up, and about as far away from that as you can get. And that was where for the first time I was exposed to people who were launching products, coming up with business ideas. They were pitching for investors. They were doing it was around the time when Uber had just launched, and there were a lot of similar type of companies being pitched. So it was amazing to actually be boots on the ground in an entrepreneur hub like Boston. I was organizing events in entrepreneurship, and that was where I could see people who were my age and younger who were doing the things that they loved and on that journey. And I loved being a part of that. And I found that I naturally gravitated towards people who had their own business. And that was the moment for me where I just, got involved in launching and involved in the launch of basically products and companies in basically every industry you can think of.
Wow, that's fascinating. And you mentioned the events, that you organized events. Tell me a bit more about that, because I love events myself.
Oh, they're great. So I was president of the Entrepreneurship and Innovation Club at my university, and that gave me a little bit of an avenue. And you've got to take any competitive advantage that you can get. If I was some random who was cold emailing or cold calling people in Boston, hey, can you come and speak at this event? It would have been a lot more difficult. But because I had the backing of the university, I had a great relationship with all of those people there. They were owned by EF, which is, I believe, the largest education company in the world. And I had a pretty good vision of the type of things that I wanted to go and organize. So we would have events like where we had the founder of Kiva, Jessica Jackley, who would come and speak at that event. I would be speaking there. We had all these amazing entrepreneurs. And it was just so cool to be a part of that and just feel the thrill and the energy and exposure to different ideas. I am a massive, because I do a lot of speaking at events, I really understand the power of it. But even when I speak at events, I still love being part of it as an attendee, because just the relationships that can be established, the ideas that you get are just absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing that occurs to me too. So I attend a lot of events, and it's about relationship, right? Like you get to, I don't like the word networking, right? Because networking sounds like in order to, right? Like I meet people in order to do something or accomplish something for myself, right? But really what it is relationships, right? It's like meeting people to create new relationships and cultivating existing relationships.
Yeah, it's so true. So when I think about the term networking, all I think about is people with their business cards trying to flick them around like ninja stars, and it's like the only criteria of success they have is to get their card into the hands of as many people as possible.
Right.
But if the end of the day, if you have been there, I've been there. If at the end of an event we're pulling out a stack of business cards out of our pocket, we've got no idea what's going on. I much prefer the approach that Tim Ferriss takes. He talks about go narrow, but go long. You're trying to go there. And every event that I attend, I always think about who are the sort of 4 or 5 or 6 people who are going to be there, who I would love to connect with. I research those people really well, and I'm trying to ask unique questions that they haven't been asked before. I'm trying to bring a good energy. I'm trying to think about what can I do to serve and be of value to them. And if you can build yourself up to a point where you can add value to influential people, then they're going to want to be part of your sphere. They're going to want to connect you with other interesting people. You need to be committed to having a vision and providing that value. And once you do that well enough, that's where people turn around and say, what can I do to help you? And that is where the whole world opens up for you.
Absolutely. You just sparked an idea. Like that would be a great podcast. You like to research those 4 or 5 people, go in with like an SM58 with a microphone flag that has the name of the podcast, and say, hey, James Whittaker, I've heard a lot about you. I'd love to interview you for a podcast. It's going to take about 5-10 minutes. So, my first question to you is like, so win the day, what inspired that? Right. So wouldn't that be a great podcast? Like you could do it live and have cocktail party sounds in the background.
Absolutely. There's something that happened to me fairly recently. So I was a big part of that. What is it? The Wayne Gretzky quote: "If you miss 100% of the shots, you don't take."
Right.
Very good friend of mine, Don Green. He's the CEO of the Napoleon Hill Foundation. I've written 2 books with the Napoleon Hill Foundation. Yes. He said he's coming to LA. There's this event being hosted by a guy called Rami El Batrawi. He's a very successful billionaire. His house is in the Hollywood Hills, and I had so much going on. I've got 2 young kids. It's difficult for me to get out there on the pavement as much as I want. And my buddy Brandon Adams was in town, and I said, let's go for this for only a few hours. That's better than nothing. So we were able to go to this event at this house. There's maybe 60 or 70 people there, and one of the people who was speaking at this event was Dr. John Gray, who wrote books like Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, sold more than 50 million copies. And after that, like while we were at that event, I said to John, big fan of your work. I have a podcast. It's got more than 10 million views now. It's doing quite well. I don't know when you head back, but I would love to bring you into the studio because I do all of my interviews in the studio in LA. Would love to sit you down and really delve into your work. That was Sunday night. Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. we were sitting in the studio because I turned up to the event, was able to find someone who'd be an amazing fit for my podcast. I did the ask, I did the research and set everything up as quick as I could. That is by far the most successful in terms of downloads and social media engagement, by far the number 1 episode that I have got. And it just speaks to me so much. It'll never cease to amaze me, the power of just turning up to do things like that. You just have no idea what's going to happen. But if you stay at home, there's not going to be a knock at the door of a huge opportunity being handed to you. You've got to go and find it.
You've got to show up.
Exactly.
Yep, you've got to show up. But yeah, and so what role have relationships played in developing your career? Like what is the impact of your focus on relationships on all of that?
It has been everything, because I had a really interesting turning point in my life when I realized once you reach a certain point, and I'm sure you've experienced this, you don't need to chase opportunities because opportunities start finding their way to you. It's a really amazing position to be in, whether it's relationships, opportunities, whatever it is. There's so many different thousands of ways that can manifest. But to take it right back, anytime that I would have a conversation with someone, I've been interviewing people now for over 10 years for different projects and things that I've been involved in. I've always tried to get better at the skills of interviewing, and I've always naturally had a curiosity about other people and what makes them successful and all of those different things. And I also do a lot of research to make sure I'm not asking them the same generic generic questions that they're going to be getting asked on every single show that they've been on. So inevitably at the end of the interview, it's very likely that the person's going to be very appreciative for the conversation that we've had. I'm thinking about what can I do to add value to that person. Maybe it's someone that I can connect them with in my network or whatever it is. And I'm always staying front of mind with them as well. Like I'm staying in touch. I'm sending them audio messages. I'm just letting them know that I'm here. I'm providing value to you however I can, and I'm thinking of you. And when you can do that, and you have built up that social capital with people, and you have a specific ask, like, hey, whoever person, I know you're connected with this #1 New York Times bestselling author. It's a dream of mine to get that person on the podcast. What do I need to do to make it happen? By the way, here are some people who I've had on my podcast recently who could be a good fit for you. Or it's a bit like what Joe Polish talks about in his new book, What's in It for Them. I know Joe is a good influence for both of us. He always talks about making sure that you can lead with that value of what you're providing to someone else. And a big mistake that people make is they focus so hard on the transaction. They're reaching out like, Rich, I need you to do this for me. And it's like, well, who the hell are you? And like, what's the point? I'm a busy person. Why do I have to go out of my way to do that? But if you can say, Rich, you know what? I know that this is a big goal of yours for the next 12 months. I found 2 or 3 people who I think could be a really valuable connection for you. Here they are. Here is a link to more information about them. If you'd like an introduction to those people, just let me know. Also, this is something that's really important to me. I'm fully respectful to your relationship. So if the answer is no, or you don't feel comfortable doing it, that's totally fine. But I noticed you're connected with this person. If you felt comfortable making an email introduction or a text message introduction, I'd really appreciate it. And then you follow up with that a few days or a week later. That's the exact strategy that I've used to be able to interview people like Barbara Corcoran, Rob Dyrdek, Bob Proctor, some of the most successful people in the planet. And it's amazing to see it all snowballing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny you mentioned that Joe Polish has been a big influence on both of us, and the immediate thing that popped in my mind is like, you and me are both wearing black T-shirts. Joe Polish wears a black T-shirt, so clearly he has influenced us.
We got the memo. I'm sure Joe's sitting somewhere wearing his black shirt right now.
Right, exactly. Except his says Genius Network, but nevertheless, yeah, absolutely. And so, kind of, what about resourcefulness? Like, what is how does resourcefulness help an entrepreneur and help you in what you do?
Well, so if I was to really, so much of my work now is studying the essence of success. What is it? How can you create it? There's so many different methodologies out there, and all of them are great. But to me, it really boils down to 2 things: resourcefulness and resilience. If you can get really good at resourcefulness, meaning that you are able to acquire whatever you need to be able to achieve your goal, relationships, like we just spoke about, is a very big component of that. So resourcefulness on one side, as well as resilience on the other side, meaning that you persist in the face of adversity when it inevitably strikes, then the world is your oyster.
You can really recover from getting knocked down.
Exactly. And I mean, as a parent now, I mean, like, these are the things that I'm trying to be focused on teaching my kids, who are 1 year old and almost 4 years old. So they're still very young. But I think back about the times in my life when I really struggled. And yes, of course, there's a lot of lessons that we find in struggle. And there are things that are just going to come out of us no matter what happens. But if you can be resourceful enough to think about that, even if you don't take the traditional path of doing really well in high school, doing really well in university and staying at the same company, if you want to take a completely different entrepreneurial path, that you can be very successful if you are focused on resourcefulness and resilience. And if you are in a relationship or a business partnership, or your company tanks, or you have a health challenge, there's a lot of people I've interviewed who have been literally hit by trucks and all sorts of crazy stuff. An 18-year-old who became a triple amputee after serving in Afghanistan during the war. Crazy stories. If you can be resilient enough to find the gift in these challenges and keep moving forward, and that's what opens it up for you to be able to have that income and that influence and that impact that you want to have. So I'm very, very big on those 3 R's, like you and I were talking about, being relationships, resourcefulness, and resilience. I think they're absolutely critical.
All right, cool. Well, let's make a segue then, using resilience, right? And here, watch this and tell me if this was a good segue. So resilience was key to the success of Napoleon Hill and Andrew Carnegie in the collaboration and what created Think and Grow Rich, right? So more than a century ago, Think and Grow Rich came out, and it was a groundbreaking book. And this movement and this mentality of resilience helped to bring us out of the Great Depression. And it's been a classic, Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, for more than a century. And then fascinating thing happened is that you got involved with the foundation to update that and bring new conversations that stem from there into our modern time. So tell me about that and how you got involved in the foundation and to author these books.
Yeah, well, there were these people who were already making a movie about Think and Grow Rich. As you said, it's the best-selling self-help book of all time, but there was never a movie made about it. And a lot of people, since it came out in 1937, which was within 1 year of How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, which is another all-time classic, so there must have been something in the water back then. But this book, they were making a movie about it. A lot of people have sort of cannibalized it and tried to rewrite it ever since it came out. And it frustrates me because I'm very close with the people in the Napoleon Hill Foundation, and I want to see, I know how powerful these principles are, and I want to see them, the essence of that staying true so it can help the next generation and the next generation and the next generation. So they were making a movie about it, and I said, well, you must have a book coming out with it. Tell me about the book. And they were very vague on the details. And I basically said to them, there's 13 principles of Think and Grow Rich. You should provide an overview of each principle in a modern context so people can naturally identify more with that. And then tell the stories, short stories of each chapter of 2 or 3 people who personified each of those principles, people who are around today, people like Barbara Corcoran and a whole bunch of other amazing people. And that's really what it became. So they said to me, can you do it? And I said, yes, I'll knock it out of the park for you, because they knew that I had written a best-selling book in Australia on personal finance and motivation before that. But it was still it even seems weird now. It's a very daunting mission to write a modern companion to the best-selling self-help book of all time. But ever since I came up with that initial concept, which I was very happy just to give them, just because I thought it was a good idea for them to run with, they turned around and said, can I do it? So the next bit of that was to not overthink it. I just needed to stay true to that vision and make sure it was something truly unique that would actually enact change for people who read it. So I came on board as executive producer of the film and author of the book not long after that meeting, and that's how I got involved with the foundation.
That's amazing. And the books in particular, it's Mental Dynamite was about the initial conversations.
Yes, so that was an unreleased Napoleon Hill manuscript that they asked me to come in and revise. There's a lot of things have changed in that time. One of the first things I did was change the masculine language so much of around, what he thinks he becomes type stuff, right, to make it more inclusive. And that's just the way that they wrote. They were being inclusive at the time, but today it doesn't sort of feel like it if you were reading that.
Right.
And also providing examples of some extraordinary people who've done some really cool things since that was first written. So that was Andrew Carnegie's Mental Dynamite, and the other book is called Think and Grow Rich, The Legacy. That's the one that's released alongside the film.
Absolutely. And so tell me about the film and like the production of that and what that's created.
Yeah, it was very cool. I have had absolutely zero experience in films before. I still enjoy watching films, but I had no background whatsoever. And a big thing that taught me was that you can have expertise, a type of specialized knowledge, as Napoleon Hill describes it. You can have it in a completely separate industry. And because you haven't had the experience of being involved in a specific industry, that those people almost have the blinkers pulled over their eyes so much because they just have a way of doing things, you can offer a fresh perspective. And that's what I was able to do to really help with the film production. So we had a big premiere in LA, which was a really cool moment, had the red carpet and all of those different things. So it was a really cool project to be involved with.
Awesome. And so "win the day" is a catchphrase of a lot of what you do, including the podcast. And so really, like, I guess the glue that ties it together is what you call the "win the day" movement. So tell me about what's at the core of that.
That all stems for me from when I was young. I had this debilitating battle with anxiety, and it absolutely crushed me. I reached a point when I was 23 years old where I basically just said, I can't live like this anymore. I was just at a complete rock bottom. And what I realized is that I was very reactionary to life. I was just going with the flow. I had zero intent. about the people I was hanging out with, what I was putting into my body, how I was sleeping, what I was reading, you name it, all the attributes of success, and I was doing the complete opposite with zero intention. And the way that I like to think about that is the opposite of Think and Grow Rich, because just as we can think and grow rich, we can think and grow poor. And that was where I made a decision to really just basically plant a flag to life and say, here I am, come and get me. And I've committed to consuming every single thing that I can find on Peak Performance and interviewing the most successful people in the world to really unlock what are those secrets and what is that formula to success to be able to help younger people to succeed. And a big part of that was when I sort of realized that each day, if you do not make the decision to win, you have automatically made the decision to lose. That's where it really got my brain ticking about, well, how can we give something, how can we give people something that they can remember when they wake up every day, just that simple mentality, and it all comes down to that, win the day. It doesn't matter what happened yesterday. There is no tomorrow. What are we going to do today? And how are we going to turn up? What is the rhythm through how we want to go about the day? And what standards does that win the day commitment dictate? How we get out of bed? Do we give ourselves some type of sacrifice, like a cold shower or doing something that you don't want to do first thing in the morning? How are we sending love to people? How are we improving our skills? How are we making the time for physical health, mental health, connecting with our children, our partner? How are we honoring our legacy through the work that we're doing? So all of those things are incorporated in that win the day mentality, and it's something that I just really love to do.
Yeah, and so it's about setting a mindset, or setting. It sounds like setting a mindset and asking the question of how, like, how can I win this day?
Exactly.
And putting your attention on that.
Yeah, exactly. Because if you don't have a focus, and really there's even one part of that that's very simple that most people don't do, is when you wake up at some part of your morning routine, make sure you have an idea of the 3 things that you're going to do today that will make today a win. Most people wake up and they spend all their time on emails, and as a result of that, they're on autopilot, getting addicted to the accumulated stress, rather than having any intentional actions of doing the specific 2 or 3 things each day that are going to move them closer to where they need to be, or even, and they don't all need to be about work. I mean, the 3 things that I write down in my journal every single day, there's usually 2 related to work. One of them is always related to the family. It might be something like, today I want to make sure I can cook dinner to take some pressure off the household. My wife works very hard. It might be to make sure I can go and get a fitness class in that I want to do. It's to make sure I can pick my daughter up from preschool at the very first minute I can, so she doesn't have to stand there wondering where I am. So there's little things like that I include in that, what would make today a win. But every single day I always have 3 things that I'm going to do today that are going to help me embody that win the day mentality.
Awesome. So if people want to learn more about you or get in touch with you, how they go about doing so?
Yeah, you can go to my website, jameswitt.com, or connect with me on Instagram at jameswitt, or even TikTok. TikTok I'm focusing pretty hard on at the moment. So my handle for TikTok is jpwitt.
And so that's Witt, WHITT.
Exactly, yes.
Awesome. Well, James, thanks so much for being here. Great to see you. And I appreciate you taking the time to do this interview.
Hey, thanks, Rich, for having such a great podcast and for having me on.
Thanks for listening to Innovations and Breakthroughs with your host, Rich Goldstein. Be sure to click subscribe, check us out on the web at innovationsandbreakthroughs.com, and we'll see you next time.